Hello and welcome to EDPY 404. I'd like to begin by introducing myself. I'm Heather. You will also listen to Haley later on. Part 1 of this webinar will cover historical and global perspective.
Before we can examine some of the more interesting issues surrounding adolescent development, it is crucial to explore how the concept of adolescence came to be. Let's begin by asking ourselves the following questions. What have the portraits of adolescents been like at different points in history? And more importantly, how and why have portraits of adolescents shifted throughout history? Early Greek philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle commented on the very nature of adolescence. According to Plato, reasoning did not belong to childhood. In fact, reasoning is the marker of an adolescent. It is in this period of life that they are first able to reason. Aristotle suggested that the most significant aspect of adolescence is the ability to choose. This is not entirely unlike the views that are held today. Aristotle also recognized the prevalence of egocentrism during adolescence. During the Middle Ages, children and adolescents were primarily viewed as miniature adults and were consequently treated as such. It was not until the 18th century that a more enlightened view of adolescence began to prevail. This view, proposed by French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, restored the view that being a child or an adolescent is indeed much different than being an adult. Rousseau shared the idea first postulated by Plato that reasoning develops through adolescence. He believed that development occurred in distinct stages and that different behaviors should be encouraged during these stages to support development. The problem with many of these great thinkers and philosophers is that although their ideas had and do still have merit, there wasn't any scientific evidence available to support them. It was not until the end of the 19th and into the early 20th century that the concept of adolescence came to fruition. G. Stanley Hall pioneered the scientific study of adolescence. His work reflects the influence of evolutionary theorist Charles Darwin. By applying Darwin's view to adolescence development, Hall proposed that development is primarily controlled by biological factors. Hall's storm and stress view suggests that adolescence is a turbulent time. Another prominent pioneer in the early study of adolescence was anthropologist Margaret Mead. After studying adolescence in South Sea Island of Samoa, she concluded that adolescence is not biological, as Hall suggested, but sociocultural. Some cultures support a smooth, gradual transition from childhood to adulthood, while others support a more turbulent transition. According to Mead, this transition is dependent entirely on the culture. According to the interventionist view, adolescence is a socio-historical creation. This view arose during the 20th century, a time when legislation was enacted that ensured the dependency of youth and made their move into an economic sphere more manageable. Some scholars even argue that the concept of adolescence was invented mainly as the byproduct of the movement to create a system of compulsory public education. What do pre-service teachers have to say about that? Following along on our timeline, let us now examine adolescence during the 1950s, a time when education meant getting a well-paying job, which in turn meant the ability to afford the lifestyle and material goods that individuals sought after. During the 1950s, adolescents had developed a physical, social, and legal identity. During the 1960s, the importance of pursuing higher education remains an important focus. Perhaps the most significant change in recent history in the study of adolescence came with the women's movement in the 1970s. Prior to this, adolescence had been studied only in relation to males. The millennials are marked by two defining characteristics: 1, ethnic diversity, and 2, connection to technology. Because of this, adolescents that have come of age in the new millennium are regarded as tolerant. Some are concerned, however, that the culture of technology is creating adults who are incredibly effective at finding short-term solutions, but need immediate gratification and are overall short-sighted in their thinking. Can we anticipate the problems? A stereotype is a generalization that reflects our impressions and beliefs about a broad category of people. One such category is adolescents. Take a moment to examine the images on the screen. What stereotypes regarding adolescents are at work here? Adolescents must follow their own developmental trajectories in order to make a competent transition from adolescence into adulthood. The concept of positive youth development focuses on the strengths of youth and positive qualities and developmental trajectories that are developed for youth rather than the risks and challenges that they may face or need to overcome. According to Jacqueline Lerner, youth need to develop the following 5 characteristics. Competence, having a positive perception of one's own actions in specific domains. 2. Confidence, having an overall sense of self-worth and self-efficacy. 3. Connection, having positive relationships with others. 4. Character, having respect for societal rules, understanding of right and wrong, and integrity. Number 5. Caring compassion, showing emotions and concern for others.
Switching topics now to global perspective. Depending on the culture being observed, adolescence may involve different experiences. Let's consider Canadian adolescence. Canada is home to many different cultures, each with differing values and morals, systems of raising children, religious practices, and so on. Due to this diversity, Canadian adolescents tend to be more tolerant of differences among their peers. In addition, further education is becoming a primary focus for Canadian adolescents. As a result, many adolescents are choosing to be married, have families, and enter their career later in life than previous generations. For example, the average age of marrying is now 31.1 years. It seems unheard of to think of a time when the average age of marriage was 16. Now couple that with the idea that marriage is the marker of adulthood, and adolescence seems to be lasting forever. Now let's talk about global perspective. Across the globe, health and well-being have improved in some areas but not in others. Fewer adolescents die from infectious diseases and malnutrition. However, more adolescents engage in health-compromising behaviors that can seriously affect development. Experiences of male and female adolescents around the world continue to vary. Overall, male adolescents still have better access to educational opportunities, yet gender differences seem to be narrowing over time. Around the world, studies show that adolescents recognize the importance of parental support in their lives. However, family dynamics from place to place are radically different. In Arab countries, for example, adolescents grow up in tight-knit family units that include extended family. This provides a network of support for adolescents. In the Western world, many adolescents grow up in divorced families. Parental involvement, particularly maternal, is not as prominent as broken families often require the mother to work to support the family. Many parts of the world, such as Latin America, South Asia, and Africa, still do not provide education for adolescents. Adolescents in these areas are unable to learn and develop the skills they need to be successful adults. Western nations stress the roles of peers in adolescent development. This peer network can be seen as a type of family in and of itself. In other regions, however, cultures restrict the role of peers. This concludes part 1 of our webinar. Check out video number 2.